Welcome everyone to another video. Today's video is one I've been hoping to do for a while. Today we are reviewing the Canon 90D. The Canon 90D came out in 2020, which is about exactly 2 years ago when this camera came out. And we are going to go over this camera and talk about the benefits from its predecessors that were extremely popular, the 60, 70, and 80D. This camera shoots a 4K at 30 frames per second and 24 frames per second, as well as Full HD, which is 1080, at 60, 30, and 24 frames per second. So some very impressive video shooting modes here. This thing also does some very impressive slow-mo. This thing has the 120 frames that were absent from the 80D that they added to this 90D. The shots just look so clean, so crisp. One drawback to that is that it does not have autofocus, but simply the fact that it has the 120 frames, even with manual focus, is very, very impressive. So often in these cheaper cameras that have 4K, there's going to be a crop on the 4K. This has no additional crop on the 4K. I say no additional crop because this is a crop sensor camera, not a full frame, so it's going to be a little bit worse in low light, which is a bit of a drawback, but there's no additional crop to the cropped sensor on the 4K, so it's gonna look just like all your other footage. This thing also has some awesome video features like a built-in time-lapse mode, which is really cool, as well as image stabilization. If you turn that on, it has a couple different modes, and the image stabilization inside this camera is quite impressive. Honestly, when I got this camera, I didn't even know it had image stabilization in it. That was an awesome surprise. As far as picture shooting goes, this also makes a phenomenal picture camera. It has a pretty fantastic shutter speed. Very impressive. It's gonna be great for like if you're doing like sports shooting, something like that. Great option there. So as far as external, like around the camera, we have some ports over here on this side. We have a mic jack as well as a headphone jack that we also had in the Canon 80D, so that's not a switch. But from the 70D that was lacking, so it's nice that they have both of those. They also have a small HDMI out as well as a USB port and a little remote plug-in. I don't know if anyone's still really using remotes in like in the video camera picture world. I don't know if anyone's still using remotes. It's there if you want it though. As far as the layout around the camera, it's going to be very, very similar to the 80D. A little bit of switch from the 70D, but if you're coming from the 90D, it's going to look pretty much exactly the same. We got a little focus joystick here, but the buttons are basically just the same. Something that they switched from the 80D is that right up here on the top, how you pull out the screen, instead of the little notch for where you grab the screen, being on the side, it's now up here on the top, which is a little bit of an adjustment to get used to. Not a big deal at all, just something that wasn't my favorite. So switching to this camera, I came off of the 70D, so this is a decent amount newer. The Canon 70D came out in 2013, and this, like I said, came out in 2019, so a good amount newer. But a huge switch on this thing, the autofocus. This thing doesn't only have face tracking, but it also has eye tracking. And in addition to that, it has 45 focus points, as opposed to 19 like you would get on the 70D. So there's way, way more places that your camera's gonna be able to grab focus. So it's gonna be the same amount of focus points as the 80D, so if you're switching from the 80D to the 90D, you're probably not gonna notice a lot of a difference there with the autofocus. In fact, it might be exactly identical, not entirely sure. But the image quality that's coming out of this thing looks honestly just so incredible. I've heard it compared to the 1DX2, which is a camera that costs multiple thousand, and this coming in at a fantastic price of only about $1,200, you're getting an incredible value. So let's just go over some quick pros and cons. I like to make it just a little quick pros and cons list so you can kind of sum this up, what you can actually take away from this video, what you can remember. So what you should remember about this video is that this camera is an incredible package. Like honestly, I don't know if you can spend a better $1,200 than this right here. So just the value and the price that it's at, fantastic. Pro number one. Pro Pro number 2 is that it is so similar to its older cameras, just better. So if you're used to using these older cameras like the 70D, 80D, it's going to make a really, really easy switch to this one because it's so similar. But it's not similar in a bad way. It has some phenomenal upgrades, but from a user's standpoint, it's going to feel pretty similar. Another major pro is those autofocus points we talked about. So that's super convenient. Another big pro are so here are some cons and some drawbacks to this camera. We have, first and foremost, it's a crop sensor camera, so it's not going to do as well in low light as those full frame cameras. Some people, feel like they need the full frame. Honestly, I'm not that way. There's not enough advantage for me to pay the extra money to get a full frame camera. And maybe it's gonna be worth it for some people to just spend up more like $2,000, get the EOS R, which is a full frame camera. You can make that decision for yourself. So being a crop sensor camera is the first drawback. The second drawback is really just more of a preference. It's not really that big of a deal, and it's this flip screen notch right here. It's moved up to the top instead of being over here on the side, which I don't really like. I'm used to when my camera's facing this way, just reaching over here, grabbing this side, pulling it around. It's a little bit different to now reach up to the top. I don't like that as well, but not a super big deal. Another con to this thing is that while it does have 120 frames per second, when you're shooting at 124 frames per second, it's going to have to be manual focus. And with such a small screen, sometimes it's pretty hard to tell when you really nail focus. And then after you're done shooting, you'll be editing your stuff and notice you almost had a really good shot, and then it was just a little out of focus. So that is a bummer that they don't have autofocus in the 120 frames. But if you're comfortable with autofocus, or if you just simply want to practice it and get good at it, it's not going to be just crippling. And another pro to this camera is that it does have 24 frames. Soon after it came out, it did not have the 24 frames, and that was added in there. That is a cool pro. So all in all, this Canon 90D is a fantastic camera. And honestly, if your budget is around $1,000, I don't know if you're going to get a better camera for the price, especially not a better Canon camera. I honestly know basically nothing about Sony. I'm pretty much a Canon only guy. That's about all I've dealt with. As far as Canon goes, I think this is the best you're going to do for $1,200 in Canon. It's a fantastic camera, a great price, and comes with some sweet features for what you're paying for. I 100% recommend this camera to you. If your budget is a little bit on the lower side, like mine is, this is a $1,200 well spent. So that's gonna do it for the video, guys. Thank you all for watching. Hopefully this was helpful. Good luck to you in your camera finding adventures. I will see you all in the next one. What did I do it in? 1932. Let's go. Oh! How many focus points does the Canon 70D have? Is the autofocus. Hello. And the face. And the auto is, but the image, I should fact check that. Is that, oh, and this thing also, oh, flash.